and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrop.
And special welcome to you free speech viewers who didn't get our show last week. So we are letting...
We don't know why. We're still investigating.
We are letting you know that if you want to see our last week's show with Michael Musto as our special guest, go to our website at www.gayusatv.org and go to recent shows. And that show was taped on 9/12/18, and it'll come up and you can watch it, especially hearing about all the great news out of India last week.
And Michael getting a little teared up.
Yes, it was a good show.
Yes.
So it's there, it's online, as it always is, as will this week's show. And in the news this week, well, as you know, we're all on the final push to stop Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, who knows what will have happened in the next 24 hours or however long it takes you to see this show. But
sometimes a week.
Exactly. But we'll tell you what we know as of the moment. Meanwhile, other news is still going on, and our president has been brushed back by the court system in his bids to discriminate against service members who are transgender and those who are HIV positive. That's good news.
Yes, of course, they'll have nothing to worry about if Brett Kavanaugh gets in. Out candidate Cynthia Nixon failed in her bid for the Democratic nomination for governor of New York, but there was lots of good news from that primary.
And a successful Democratic nominee for governor in Georgia, not successful in winning the election yet, but in getting nominated, Stacey Abrams, spoke at the HRC National Dinner and was really amazing. So we're going to show you a little of her speech.
In Connecticut, there are three times the number of out gay candidates running for Republican seats from the state assembly than there are gay Democrats.
I'm sure they're all fine people.
Well, it's an interesting story.
Yeah, all right. And we're also going to show you a very interesting and moving speech by a small-town school superintendent in Pennsylvania who came out in the middle of a school board hearing.
Yeah. LGBT students, or ex-students actually, in Wisconsin and Alabama are suing their school districts for years, in some cases a decade of anti-LGBT bullying.
Terrible stories. In New York City, they have finally allowed people to have an X non-binary gender marker.
An NCAA swimming champion has come out as gay, as has a male golf pro in a first.
And we will review the LGBT news from the Emmy Awards. Hannah Gadsby, terrific.
Right.
All right, so I guess we have to start with Brett Kavanaugh, still
Well, I'll
around.
tell you, Georgetown Prep
sounds
like a lot worse than my Catholic boys' school. I mean, there were a few heavy drinkers, back in the 70s that I remember. Maybe things loosened up in the 80s, but I don't remember the culture being as horrible as that. I mean, as this Georgetown Prep thing, which
in the mid 60s we had a boy at the local boys' private school who was sent to Meningers for alcoholism. He was about 16.
I'm not saying none of it never happened, but wow. I mean, when you read these stories about Kavanaugh and his buddy Mark Judge, who he hung out with.
Blackout drunk.
Horrendous stuff.
Yeah. Well.
And rape. Or attempted rape.
Yes. And I was interested to read as we go through this about who's going to testify and what investigations and everything. And Mark Judge, who I hadn't thought much about, just another prep school guy with him, and didn't want to testify. I thought because he really doesn't remember because he was so drunk, and Kavanaugh doesn't remember because he was so drunk.
As they say in the Boys in the Band, Christ, was I drunk last night? I don't remember a thing.
Different story. But I read this whole thing on Mark Judge in Media Matters. They did a real deep dive, as they say, on him. And
before he erased his social media history.
Well, first of all, it turns out he's now a conservative commentator. He's a very right-wing guy.
Moralist.
And he hates women, hates people of color, says absolutely horrendous things about women asking to be attacked. No wonder he doesn't want to testify. It's not because he doesn't remember. It's because he doesn't want to be called to account for all these things that he said.
He compared same-sex marriage to incest. And he also he watched the film Gay Sex in the 70s by our friend Joe Lovett to prove a lot of his points. And
that's a good film. You should watch that.
It's a wonderful film.
Yeah.
But of course he'd earlier written about his high school, describing it as a nest of debauchery, and said they often drank themselves into a stupor. I mean, I didn't start drinking until I was 33, and only then a little glass of wine once in a while.
And I stopped drinking when I was 21.
But Trump called Kavanaugh one of the finest people I have ever known, which is usually a prelude to getting cut loose in the Trump universe.
David Brock called him a very right-wing monster when he worked for Bush, and that he would, when they were doing the whole Ken Starr investigation, they would sit and watch on things happening on TV, and when Hillary would come on TV, Kavanaugh would call her the C word.
Wow.
Yes.
And he seemed like such a nice fellow at the hearings.
Here's another thing. As a lawyer in the late 90s, 20 years ago, he represented something called the Correctional Medical Services, which is one of these organizations that is a private contractor that's supposed to supply medical services to prisons. Along with the whole privatized prison system, you have privatized services to prisoners. So this...
it doesn't benefit the prisoners.
Well, he represented them because they were charged with inadequate treatment of people with HIV in prison. This is the late 90s, and they were refusing to supply protease inhibitors. So people are dying because they're getting the old drugs that are completely ineffective, and he's standing up for them and representing them in court. His line was that the suit against CMS should be dismissed because the prisoners should have gone to the administrative judges in the prison system before suing this group, thereby, shortening their lives because they were unable to get the thing. Also, the group segregated people with HIV. He's not a good guy.
Dr. Blasey Ford, the very credible accuser against Kavanaugh, 200 women from her high school, Holton, have signed a statement of support and said her story was, quote, consistent with what we heard and lived while attending Holton. Kavanaugh had already in the pipeline 65 women supporters from his high school days, but they started to peel off when reporters started calling them, and Dr. Ford came forward. Dr. Ford is trying to, somebody wrote, I think it was Juan Cole, Dr. Ford is trying to forestall a trauma to the nation that was inflicted on her, because when this guy gets in, it's going to be curtains for us for a while.
Of course, the other thing is that I think we do have a chance of getting his name pulled, and then we're going to get someone just as bad.
Right. It's also been bad week for Joe Biden. We're going to talk more about him later, but of course it's resurrected how badly he handled the Anita Hill hearings, which he has apologized for.
All of them did.
I have to say, if Brett Kavanaugh were a black Democrat, and I qualify that, Republicans would have been getting the noose out for him over this. And, don't forget, and it has been pointed out, Trump went after the Central Park Five, young teenagers who were convicted of raping a woman in Central Park, exonerated, but Trump took out full-page ads saying they should be executed.
After they had been exonerated.
Right.
He never bought their exoneration, even though DNA evidence convicted someone else of the crime.
The Human Rights Campaign is running anti-Kavanaugh ads in Alaska and Maine to hit Murkowski and Collins, who seem to be our hopes there.
And has joined with a lot of other organizations to put together a public service announcement. Well, it's actually an online paid ad starring John Legend that is an anti-Kavanaugh campaign. Yes. And we have that John Legend ad, and we're going to show it to you right now.
Who becomes the next Supreme Court justice is the decision of a lifetime. Your lifetime. Brett Kavanaugh's troubling views on the issues that matter most and his rushed confirmation process make him unfit for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court.
A court that decides how safe I'll be.
That will decide if I can vote.
A court that decides where we can learn.
And how I am treated.
That will make decisions about how I can control my body.
A court that will decide
if our family will stay together.
That will decide if I have the right to stand up to my boss.
A court that will decide if I get equal pay.
Or how much care I deserve.
This fall, your senators will vote on Kavanaugh. How they vote will impact you for a lifetime. Tell them to vote no on Kavanaugh. Remember, they answer to you. To stop Kavanaugh, call your senators at 202-224-3121 or visit justice2018.org for more info.
And the Human Rights Campaign was part of that campaign, and we do have to try to stop them. It is going to be a disaster. I mean, we'll repeat it again. It's going to be a disaster for LGBT rights, women's reproductive rights, race, just
religion,
consumers,
yeah,
you name it. It's just going to be awful, and that's why they're pushing so hard. And who's pushing? The Republicans take no chances. They stacked, let's put this picture up. They stacked the Judiciary Committee with nothing but white guys. They didn't dare put any Republican on that committee who might
no
stray.
Susan Collins, no Lisa Murkowski, none of the Republican women are on that committee to raise any questions. It is just 11
They're so bad that
I
think they were talking about if they do get to question Dr. Blasey Ford, that they want to have a woman staffer do the questioning because they don't want to be seen questioning them right before the midterms.
It is a kind of delicious moment, but we cannot afford to be complacent or sit back. By the way, I read the most wonderful piece in New York, the current issue of New York Magazine, this week's issue, by Rebecca Traister, who is a wonderful, wonderful writer on current politics. And it's about the anger of women and the politicization of women in this. And she says, I wanted to just get to the end of this. One of the things she points out is that what was sobering to me in the summer of 2018 was that women had been here before, yet we had to get here again. The process of change was going to be slow, hard, and often circular. And then she quotes some of the women who've become active in things like the teachers' strikes and political races and everything. It's now clear to all of us that there's way more work to do than just one issue. But in many ways, we actually love this. It has consumed our lives. And she quotes Vivian Gornick talking about the bliss in the 70s in the women's movement of being involved in this work and what joy it brings and how it is a lifetime of work. And we've certainly found that in this movement. Rebecca Traister in the current New York Magazine. Highly, highly recommend this piece.
Okay. Shall we review Mr. Trump's week?
Sure.
Well, he met with the anti-LGBT president of Poland, Duda, this week and had nothing but praise for him, except for the fact, did you see this? When he signed an agreement with him, he wouldn't give a chair to Duda, so Duda's like standing up and bending over and trying to take the picture with him. And, well...
Even after Duda said they're going to make Fort Trump all over Poland?
The Polish press is furious about this. Our anti-gay president has been disrespected.
He doesn't care.
And then,
Trump doesn't care.
Well, he's obviously shameless. This release of these top secret documents. I mean, this is endangering us in the world. But of course, he said, I'm doing it for transparency. The guy who won't release his taxes.
And who is releasing like 0.5% of the relevant documents so that he can completely manipulate the conversation.
But there's one thing he can't tweet about anymore. The cost of the Mueller investigation. He says it's so expensive. It's bankrupting the nation practically. Look at all the money they're spending. Well, just from Manafort alone, they're getting $21 million in his property, including in Trump Tower, which should be turned over to the homeless.
That would be amusing.
Joe Biden this week spoke at HRC, said he wished he'd spoken out against Trump sooner.
I'm so sick of hearing that.
He admits he was late on same-sex marriage, but he said the American people were way ahead of us.
Well, we always are, and we're always ahead of them on things like war. And then they stand up and say, Vietnam, Iraq, whatever you want to say. And it's not like they didn't have a chance to know what was right. We're all out there screaming in the streets at them, calling their offices, yelling at them in person. And then they say, oh, maybe I made the wrong decision there. Maybe I was late.
They were all, I mean, you can hear it from Lyndon Johnson on the tapes in the White House. He knew what he was doing was wrong all along was wrong, and it was never going to be effective. And they did it anyway.
They do it anyway.
Because of money and politics, and they think that you can't stand up on these things. You can't stand up for peace.
And they're all more concerned about retaining their stupid jobs and doing the wrong thing than standing up for what's right.
There you are.
All right. Well, the courts, until Kavanaugh or someone else gets confirmed, are still occasionally doing the right thing. And in California, a federal court rejected the U.S. government's motion to lift the injunction against imposing the trans-military ban.
The judge wrote that the, quote, loss of unit cohesion has been weaponized against open service by a new minority group every few years, and you gotta cut this out. He says the military has always been able to adapt to a lot of these changes. The case is called Stockman v. Trump, and it's being run by NCLR, National Center for Lesbian Rights, and GLAAD, G-L-A-D, the Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders.
I think they reinterpreted that name, but I can never remember. And then a court in Virginia, a federal court there, is allowing Lambda's suit against attempts to throw HIV-positive people out of the military to proceed. That lawsuit can proceed. The government tried to stop it, but the court said, nope, this suit can go ahead.
They're denying deployment, they're denying advancement for any of these HIV-positive officers, and they're subject to discharge. Outserve SLDN is also challenging that. I'm not going to even attempt to say what it stands for anymore.
Service Members Legal Defense Network.
The U.S. Border Patrol seems to be kind of out of control. 4 women were killed in the past 2 weeks by an Intel supervisor there, and among the murdered was Janelle Ortiz, 28, a trans person who lived in Laredo, Texas.
She is described in most news reports as a trans woman, and a viewer of ours who is a trans woman alerted us initially to this, and that's what the story has been. And then the New York Times this morning reports describes her by her male name, says she identified as male, and was simply a cross-dresser wearing dresses. So
this perpetrator who worked for the U.S. Border Patrol, Juan David Ortiz, he also kidnapped a 5th woman. She got away, and that's how he got caught.
Yeah. But back to good politics. So Stacey Abrams is the African-American straight woman, great ally of the community, who is running for governor in Georgia. Miraculously won the Democratic nomination.
Great candidate.
Fabulous candidate, but unexpected as a winner of the primary.
That's this year.
And running against a very conservative guy who's Trump endorsed on the Republican ticket. So she came to the HRC, Human Rights Campaign National Dinner last week and spoke, and they posted some excerpts of her speech, put them together and posted them on Twitter, and we were very impressed, blown away by what she had to say, so we thought we would share that with you.
I'm an ally to a community that I may not be a direct part of, but I am a descendant of the fight for our rights, and I believe that you cannot believe in your own rights if you're not willing to fight for the rights of others, and I will never forget that. A fellow legislator, a Republican, and he pulls out a bill, and he says, I know your parents are pastors, and I said, yeah. He's like, and I know you're a woman of faith. I said, absolutely. He said, I want you to sign on to this bill. It was my first glimpse of the RFRA bill. And as I read it, my heart stopped and my blood chilled because I thought, what have I done to make him believe that I would sign this piece of legislation? What has he heard in my words about my faith that would help make him believe that I would sign on to legislation to strip rights from others? When I gave him back his original bill, he went back to his seat, and I went to the hallway to find the LGBTQ lobbyist. I'm like, you need to see this crap. Here. I was raised to know that my faith should never be used as a sword to strike down another community. It should always be a shield to protect. And by God, as the next governor of Georgia, I will make sure that bill never crosses the finish line in the state of Georgia. Georgia is one of the few states that has absolutely no protections on the books for the LGBTQ community members who are employed in our state. They can be fired simply for being who they are. And I tell you right now, my opponent will usher in their termination. We are a state that is on the cusp of greatness or the cusp of ignominy. And the only difference is what happens on November 6th. Because more than protecting rights, it's also protecting lives. Georgia has one of the fastest growing and highest rates of HIV/AIDS in the nation. And unless the state of Georgia expands Medicaid, people will die in our state. And we have to stop that from happening. But I also know that we can win these elections, that the surprise victories that have happened again and again and again this year should be no surprise. Because they are communities that have been empowered by Obergefell, that have been empowered by the fights that you have led, and that know that if we fight hard enough and long enough and strong enough, we will make progress, but progress cannot be stopped in November, and if we win in November, we will win forever going forward. That is what's at stake.
Fantastic.
She really is. And again, governor of Georgia, close race. She could win if the turnout and the enthusiasm is enough. So if you're in Georgia or you know people in Georgia, please make them vote for Stacey Abrams.
Right. Meanwhile, back at the Trump ranch, they're capping the number of refugees the United States will take in at 30,000. And this is going to be a death sentence for a lot of LGBTQ people who come from places like Egypt and Chechnya and places like that. Congress needs to raise that limit. And then this week, we've talked about this before, what Betsy DeVos wants to do to change how Title IX is, regulations are interpreted, to make it easier for religious schools and universities to discriminate. Well, they leaked it. And basically they're saying, if you have an objection from your school, you now just write a letter to us, but we're not going to publicize who asked for a waiver, which is what the Obama administration did.
Well, we had to force the Obama administration to publicize the list, but yes.
And they also want to make it easier to commit sexual harassment and rape, of course, at your school. I mean, that's literally what they're trying to do there.
Simply by putting Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
Right. Okay, more politics.
Yes. Well, Cynthia Nixon did not win the Democratic nomination for governor in New York.
She got 35% of the vote. She certainly pushed Cuomo to the left on things.
She did, although I noticed that the minute he won nomination, he was back to his old tricks. Oh, yes. Immediately.
This was not a progressive wave.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. See? Well, he's something.
Very nasty.
He's nasty in victory.
Yeah.
But of course, Cynthia made a big mistake by not coming on the show and be our guest during the campaign. That could have put you over the top, Cynthia.
Come on now.
Oh, we both helped. We both supported her.
Totally.
Now, but the big silver lining in New York, and it was kind of a shock to me. There were all kinds of candidates running against these rogue Democrats who caucus with Republicans. 6 out of the 8 Democrats like that were defeated at the polls.
Yeah,
it was sweet.
But unless some of those Republicans are defeated in November, all it's going to take is the one or two remaining bad Democrats to caucus with the Republicans.
Working hard on that.
Yeah.
Even our mayor, de Blasio, has made peace with the governor for the time being so that we can win in November.
Through gritted teeth, as I read today.
Tish James, the public advocate of New York, was nominated for Attorney General. So that if she wins, and as expected, that will be an open seat for public advocate, and there'll be a free-for-all election. And everybody's getting into the act. We told you last week, Christine Quinn, the former speaker, out lesbian, is looking to run. But also Assembly member Danny O'Donnell, we have his picture there, is running actually for that seat if it opens up.
He made a very formal announcement.
He did, and the former speaker, also Melissa Mark Viverito, was looking to run, along with a lot of other people.
So far there are about 20 candidates, and whoever,
it's the second most powerful post, not most powerful, but the second highest post. You succeed the mayor if the mayor, is indisposed.
No primary, just a free-for-all election. Whoever gets the most votes wins. You could probably win with 15% of the vote at this point, but they only hold the seat until next year, when there will be a more formal primaries and election process.
And our former mayor, Mike Bloomberg, a Republican and an independent, wants to try for the Democratic nomination for president, and I say, let him waste his money.
All right. Can we get into educational news?
Well, there's a couple of other political notes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, did you read about this horrible thing that's happening in Florida with Rick Scott? So he's running for Senate, right?
Yeah.
But he's going to be the governor until January, whatever.
Okay.
And he is saying, I have 12 hours in which I can replace 3 people on the Supreme Court who will be retiring, Democrats, and put 3 other people in for the rest of for another 10 years or whatever the hell it is.
Without any kind of approval from anyone, just appointing the seats?
Exactly.
Oh,
and there is a court challenge to it, which will go before the Supreme Court of Florida, but he is a monster.
Well, I hope people listen to that and don't vote for him for Senate.
And in Connecticut, all right, here's what's happening.
Okay.
6 gay people are running for the General Assembly as Republicans. There are only 2 openly gay Democrats who are running. And one of the Republicans, this guy named John Scott of Mystic, says we're fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And the party has this plan, because it's a very narrow Democratic margin up there in the Assembly.
Yeah.
They recruited these gay people because they thought they would be more appealing to swing voters, and that's their strategy for taking back the House.
Food for thought for the national politics.
Yes, absolutely. Well, of course, I don't understand.
I
don't understand how you can be in that party given who it's led by.
Not to mention gay in that party. Right. All right. In Texas, the Board of Education has voted to remove mention of Hillary Clinton from the social studies curriculum.
And some other things.
Well, and they control textbooks across the country because they are the biggest school system in the country. So textbook publishers run everything by them.
Wasn't California looking at doing that too, so that they could become the new kingpin?
They're trying, but
bigger.
Historically, it's been Texas that has controlled all textbooks across the country.
That's true.
So, whatever.
Don't believe everything you read, kids.
All right. In
Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
Zelda Menifee has a federal suit against the school district and the superintendent and 8 teachers for inadequate response to bullying. Menifee is now 19 years old, a trans ex-student at Grissom High School, forced to go to boys' phys ed, forced to wear pants. I mean, it just went on and on and on and on and on.
Well, she quit high school in the end and got her GED because her harassment was so bad. And then on the northern end of the country, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, a gay young man, Guadalupe Paredes, is suing. He also had to drop out of school because he had been bullied so extensively.
Since the 3rd grade.
when he started to talk about being gay.
Dropped out in the 11th grade, hospitalized in the 5th grade for psychological issues over this, often vomited on Sunday nights because having to go back to school. The mom tried to help. They told Mom, tell him just to avoid the harassers as best he can. Then he started hiding. Then one of the harassers told him to kill himself. And he told he was bringing it on himself for acting gay, telling others that he is gay. He was ordered to work with his tormentor on a project. This is how they handled it. So he's suing under Title IX, sex discrimination and equal protection under the 14th Amendment.
The cowardice of people in power who will not take responsibility for interrupting this kind of torture is unbelievable.
Well, there's some interruption going on in Beaver, Pennsylvania, isn't there?
Yes. Beaver County, Pennsylvania is a rural area, and they have had a controversy because the superintendent of schools suspended a principal. Now, we don't know why the principal was suspended. That's considered confidential, but the principal's supporters were claiming that he was suspended because he supported a Christian school group.
And she had a homosexual agenda. So her response to
the school superintendent. Yes. So at a public school board meeting, the school superintendent, Carrie Rowe, talked about these issues and came out to the assembled audience.
A 20-year veteran of the system.
Now, this video we're going to show you is a little hard to watch. It was shot on a phone camera from the audience, but
very eloquent.
Very eloquent. So we want you to hang with it and watch and listen to Carrie Rowe.
Thank you all for coming tonight. For the visitors who aren't familiar, my name is Dr. Carrie Rowe. I'm the superintendent of schools. I'm gay. I wanted to tell you that straight away because it's likely the reason that some of you are here tonight. I worked in education for 20 years. I've never addressed my personal life because it's never been relevant to my job. To be honest, it's still not relevant. However, there's a very vocal minority in this community who have decided to take my sexuality and use it as a cudgel against me. Last week, I was made aware that a group of people were planning to protest my continued employment in this district because I was allegedly firing Christians to promote a homosexual agenda. So let's be clear tonight about what my agenda is. My agenda is to provide a safe environment for all students, including students who identify as part of the LGBTQ community. The Beaver Area School District will continue to provide a safe space for all such students, and the community should exercise caution here because these students are listening tonight. They're reading your Facebook posts, your posts on news articles, and they're listening to your not-so-private conversations. They're at an age when they're trying to figure out who they are, and they don't need adults in positions of authority to tell them that who they are is in some way abnormal or wrong. According to the Center for Disease Control, suicide is one of the top 3 causes of death for individuals ages 10 to 24. And of those students, LGBTQ identifying students are at a 7 times greater risk for suicide. That's what's at stake when you make your reckless comments. And that's why I'm speaking out here today. What's happening to me is a form of bullying, plain and simple. These individuals are trying to bully me out of a job that I love because legally they can. The fact is that in Pennsylvania, I can be fired simply for being gay. There are no civil rights protections for gay individuals in Pennsylvania. The other frightening thing about this situation is the brazen way in which it's being carried out. 5 years ago, these people would have needed to trump up some job-related reasons for my termination and hide the real motivation that they seek to have me dismissed as the superintendent. And that's the other reason that I'm speaking out here today. I'm calling on members of the Pennsylvania legislature to finally do the right thing and make it illegal for a vocal minority, a minority group who seeks input from as far away as Texas, to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. It's time to make LGBTQ persons a protected class so that this type of misguided coup never happens again to another public official. I care about this district and about all of our students, and I care too much to remain silent any longer. And now I speak directly to the students of Beaver Area School District. As your superintendent, I tell you, no matter who you are, who you love, where you worship, if you worship, what your racial background is, what your disability status is, you have a safe space here. I will make no room for hate.
And she got applause, and there were students there holding up signs saying, "Textbooks, not Bibles. Keep church and state separate." They were supporting her.
It was a tremendously eloquent speech and very brave, and there's someone who is standing up to support all students and to interrupt that kind of hate
that
and
is the answer
discrimination.
to bigots.
You know, it's very simple to make a statement like that. It takes guts,
in
but
some places you will get fired, and she realized she was risking her job, I suppose.
Still is, because, you know, the one thing she's wrong about is there are protections in various cities and towns in Pennsylvania, but there is no statewide law.
Yes.
And there needs to be.
Well, and in New York, we made some progress too. The city council voted 41-6 to add an X category to birth certificates for people who are non-binary. Sponsored by Corey Johnson, the Speaker of the Council, who's going to be our co-host on this show in a couple of weeks. You know, but it was, you know, they were 6 votes against it in New York.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised.
Well, one guy said it was going to raise public safety issues.
Please.
No, this means you don't have to, you can just do a personal affidavit to change your marker on your birth certificate. Okay. You don't have to get any kind of doctor thing or healthcare provider thing.
And GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, although they may have changed what those initials stand for too, and MAP, the Movement Advancement Project, have made a PSA that is going to run as a digital ad in 15 states in donated space online. And this is called Hallway, and it's part of their Safe Schools campaign. And it's an attempt to stand up for trans students. And the star of the spot is a young trans woman. So let's look at Hallway.
I'm a transgender girl. I know a lot of people have questions about what it means to be transgender, and I get that. What I tell them is, I was born a boy, but inside I always knew I was female. With the support of my parents, I've transitioned to live every day as the girl I've always known myself to be. Every student should have a fair chance to do well in school, but forcing transgender kids like me into restrooms that don't match our gender identity means a lot more bullying and abuse. And forcing me to use a separate restroom from all the other kids makes me stand out and just makes it worse. School is already hard enough. Schools should protect kids from bullying. They shouldn't be passing policies that create or promote it. We all care about safety and privacy in restrooms. If I can't safely use the restroom, school becomes impossible. I just want a chance to learn, graduate, and make my family proud, without having to be scared every time I do something as basic as using the restroom.
Very nice.
I think it's really good, and in a very short space shows both an administrator who doesn't stand up for her and condemns her, and then another one who comes in and overrules that and supports her.
And there are a lot of good people in this country. The American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement this week calling for support of trans and gender diverse youth.
Now, on the other hand, we have this whole controversy about Sesame Street that has once again reared its ugly head. A writer, or former writer for Sesame Street, says that he wrote the Bert and Ernie characters as a gay couple. And this, of course, has created another firestorm of controversy. Sesame Street
put out with J.K. Rowling saying that Dumbledore was gay. even though she never mentioned that in the books, but she said, of course he was gay.
Well, this is different, though, in that Sesame Street puts out a statement saying, they're puppets. They have no sexual orientation.
But Miss Piggy does.
Well, this became a subject of conversation, as so many things do, on The View this week.
Yes.
So they're discussing, someone says, well, I always thought they might be a couple. Someone else says, it never occurred to me. I don't know. I say, whatever. And Whoopi, who I think has some strange opinions occasionally, sits there and says, they are puppets. They have no sexual orientation. And, a lot of parents, she says, do not want this discussed on a TV show. They think it is up to them to raise these issues with their kids, and it is not appropriate. So, and she is adamant about this, and she totally overpowers the conversation and gets the last word by saying, now, let's remember, they do not have a sexual orientation. They are Muppets. Now, of course, what could be better and more natural than to have gay Muppets?
Let's have a talk with Whoopi.
I would love to have a talk with Whoopi, but I am not optimistic that I can change her mind on these things.
Speaking of parental objections, I was on Regis and Kathy Lee. There was some gay bashing incident. They were a local show in those days, and they had me on. And
40 years ago.
This woman calls in, and she says, when you have this on, I have to hide my children.
Well, that's just the mustache.
It was so funny. I said, I rest my point. I rest my case. There's a problem in society.
Yes, there certainly is.
And there's a problem in the Ingram phone family. Laura Ingram, horrible Fox News host. Her brother is gay, and she uses him as a prop sometimes. I have a gay brother. I'm not bigoted. He said she's a monster, and that we grew up with an abusive alcoholic father who was a Nazi sympathizer. Like father, like daughter. This was the family soil that gave bloom to my sister's anger. She's very smart, very well spoken, but her emotional heart is just kind of dead. And you see it in her face on TV, and this is all true.
Yeah. Well, what's the excuse for the 3 pastors in Rumford, Maine, who complained that the local library, which was acknowledging Banned Books Week and putting on display books that had been banned, the pastors wanted those books banned from that display because some of them were homosexual. And this was bad for the children who might go into the library.
Yep, that happened. In Lafayette, Louisiana, the library was planning Drag Queen Story Hour to be presented by the University of Louisiana Gay Fraternity, and that's caused an uproar there. They haven't decided yet.
Well, in Michigan and in, where else? New York, there are some fights, per usual, over state funding of religious charities that run adoption and foster care operations.
Yep.
In Michigan, the judge refused to dismiss a lawsuit brought by the ACLU against state funding of discriminatory agencies. And in New York, Buffalo Catholic Charities has ended its adoption and foster care programs after a gay couple applied for to adopt or foster a child. They just shut down. They went out of business.
Well, I think the Brooklyn Diocese of Catholic Diocese is going under. They're going out of business.
$27 million?
$27.5 million to 4 boys at that time who were molested by a religion teacher, not a priest, but a religion teacher who was sponsored by them, who they tried to say, oh, he's not our employee. He only worked in our office and did our bidding. But
the kids were 6 to 12.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Now, the Attorney General of the state is investigating the entire Catholic crime operation on that. It's just awful.
Better news. Congratulations to Tad Fujikawa, a young professional golfer. He was the youngest guy ever to make it to the U.S. Open.
When he was 15.
Yeah, and he has come out, and that's
something lesbian pros have been doing for years.
Yes, but a first for the male PGA Tour.
It is.
And it's very brave of him, I think.
He's 27. Now I'm standing up for myself and the rest of the LGBT community in hopes of being an an inspiration and making a difference in someone's life.
He's had a lot of problems with depression and anxiety over the last few years.
But now I can be the best version of myself, he says.
Well, I think coming out will help him. I've always said that coming out makes you happier, safer, and more successful.
And he won the Hawaiian Open last year.
Yeah.
The local Hawaiian
not
Open,
the
not
PGA
the
Tour.
PGA Tour. No.
And in California, Stanford swim champion Abram Devine, I got that right? Devine has come out.
He won the NCAA 400
He's a big champ.
in March. He worried about coming out to his teammates, and he said his apprehension was unfounded. They were only upset that he'd been struggling with this.
You know, we hear that story so often, and we don't know how to convince people that, in fact, you will get support from most people if you come out.
How do we feel about
We can't guarantee anything. We don't know your particular family or friends or community, but it is quite common for people to be afraid and then to find that, in fact, people support them.
They just had the conference of the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association out in Palm Springs, and one of the sponsors was Fox News.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but as one of the people involved early on in founding that organization, Fox News has always been a sponsor of NLGGA. Always, always, always. They have sponsored the whole conference many years. They have supplied their people. Fox and all the other networks have always been involved with NLGGA.
You know, I have a problem with that.
I don't know whether I have a problem with that, but I'm no longer a member of the organization because I think it's a jobs program. It's not about really changing coverage or being activists.
I would have a great deal of difficulty working in a place like that, I must say.
Well, working at Fox News, but we're talking about NLGGA is an association of journalists.
And Grindr is still allowing the exact location of millions of cruising men to be found through another app that comes in and goes on theirs that they could get rid of. It gives exact data. It can find the corner that you're on. It can find the coffee shop that you're on. And this is a problem, especially in places where we are being hunted.
And this week we celebrate Bisexual Pride Day, Bisexual Visibility Day, and the LGBT Center in New York is flying the Bisexual Pride flag. There it is. And in West Hollywood, this Saturday, the 22nd, they will have a Bi Pride Parade.
All right, let's whip through some international news.
Let's do.
In Cuba, the new president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, we have a picture of him. He's come out for same-sex marriage. I defend there being no discrimination of any kind, and I want to put it in the Constitution.
Well, this is controversy there because they are rewriting the Constitution, and that is one of the proposals, and it turns out to be the most controversial proposal in the proposed new Constitution.
So that referendum in Romania to prevent gay couples from marrying is going to be held on October 6th and 7th,
Yes.
and they're doing this because they have to get 30% of the people out to the polls or it doesn't count.
Yes, you have to have 30% of the eligible voting population vote in order for it to count.
The Prime Minister says this is not against sexual minorities. Well, who isn't against? And of course, Kim Davis is over there, the Kentucky clerk. Look at her.
You can recognize her by her inevitable teal sweater.
But she never changes.
Yeah.
That's her trademark. She's over there with Liberty Counsel. She's getting on a bandwagon because this thing is going to pass in Romania. I will be very shocked if it doesn't.
NGOs, non-governmental organizations there, have filed suit to stop this referendum.
I thought that the court said it could go ahead, but all right.
Oh, well.
And then in Taiwan, they're having their referendum on November 24th on same-sex marriage. I'm not particularly optimistic, but Evan Wolfson is getting involved in this now.
Venezuela, which has enough problems to deal with, is considering including legalizing same-sex marriage in its new constitution. And in Hong Kong, after they've been through a couple of lawsuits about recognizing married or civilly partnered foreign, spouses, partners.
For visas.
Yes, they have now, the government has said, all right, no mas, We will recognize all foreign partners who are legally partnered or
was a lot of
spouses.
pressure from the financial firms. They want to be an international financial center, and a lot of gay people work for these places.
Well, these international banks and law firms and everything assign their employees to Hong Kong for a period of time, and they want to bring their partners. And the partners had trouble getting visas and permission to work in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is knuckling under. But they're still not approving any kind of legal marriages for their residents.
Nor is Northern Ireland, but the Court of Appeal there did hear the legal challenge to the ban on same-sex marriage. There's the last part of the United Kingdom that is holding out on same-sex marriage. They dismissed the case last year.
And the Church of Wales is going to study officiating same-sex marriages.
In Serbia, for Belgrade Pride, there's a campaign on to stop the lesbian prime minister from being there even.
Well, she was there. It took place, and she showed up.
Again?
She did show up.
All right, but there was a campaign to stop her because they're not getting anywhere.
They're not crazy about her.
No, because she's from a conservative party, and she's not supporting our rights.
And in Trinidad and Tobago, the government is appealing the court decision to decriminalize homosexuality. They're appealing that to the United Kingdom Privy Council. And the good news about that is that if the Privy Council upholds the decriminalization, that may have a ripple effect for other Commonwealth countries around the world. And of course, the original decision in Trinidad and Tobago was very influential on the India court decriminalizing homosexuality.
In Germany, a teenager, 17 years old, was arrested for plotting an attack on an LGBTQ nightclub in the Frankfurt area. He planned to bomb it. He was also going to bomb a Catholic church. See, we can get together against these. They hate us both.
The U.S. helped track him down. I think there was something about him buying explosives, maybe online, and Rick Grinnell was involved in this. In Chile, the House there has approved the gender change rules, but the president still has to sign this, so that's a question.
The anti-LGBTQ World Congress of Families convened in Moldova, led by Brian Brown of the National Organization for Marriage. He's the president of that group. In the past, at that group, Ted Cruz's father spoke about how LGBTQ people were trying to legalize pedophilia. This is the guy, of course, who was part of the Kennedy assassination, as you know, from the president. The Vatican Secretary of State attended this conference.
Well, sure, they're in league together. In Shanghai, a female pop star, Dua Lipa, was performing, and there were fans waving rainbow flags. Well, the cops dragged them out. They grabbed them and dragged them out of the concert, and the pop star was mortified by this.
Russia's found a new way to persecute us. They have a new law on foreign films. Only festivals that are registered as on a permitted list will be able to screen films without a special permit, and this is a way to target LGBTQ film festivals from being able to go on.
Russia is also teasing the world about the stories of them sending their people out to poison Putin opponents around the world.
Well, the British have pictures of the two guys who did those poisoning in Salisbury.
Yeah, but they're happily back in Russia and free. They're not being prosecuted. But Russian TV did an interview with them, and they're saying things like, "Oh, look at them. They must be gay because they're so cute."
Well, the reporter who interviewed them
and
said,
therefore they couldn't be the poisoners because they'd be too weak as gay people.
Why were you sleeping in the same bed in London when you were there? What unites you was what the reporter said.
But meanwhile, Russia has poisoned the husband of a Pussy Riot member, a guy who also was one of the protesters at the World Cup, jumped on the field.
Maybe we better be a little more careful what we say about Russia, huh?
And the Colin Kaepernick Nike ad that's so provocative and good. Well, Caster Semenya in South Africa has also done a Nike ad. She's the one who has been condemned as having too much testosterone and being too good as a track star. So her ad includes her saying things like, "Would you be more comfortable if I were not competing? Too bad.
Right.
That's what the ad says. All right, entertainment news. AIDS news.
Well, in the United Kingdom, a high court has overturned Gilead's patent on Truvada.
Yes.
And that's going to reduce the cost by about 10,000%. I mean, literally.
Because patients will now have access to the generic version.
And this has renewed the push to make it available through the NHS, which is the health service, by 2019. Come on, now it's cheap. Do it.
Yeah.
You have no excuse. And in New Jersey, the bill to legalize marijuana has come out, and it's, they're going to allow for deliveries and places to smoke outside the home. All right, entertainment news.
Emmy Awards, terrible, awful show, really, really not funny, bad.
Really bad for Maya Rudolph and
the whole
Fred
thing,
Armisen.
Colin Jost and Michael Che. The whole Saturday Night Live production, which is what it was very much like Saturday Night Live, not funny.
Right.
The whole opening number about, oh, yes, we've solved our diversity problem, ha, 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 not funny. So it was really a
What'd you think about Reparation Emmys?
I like that.
That was kind of cute,
Yeah, that was cute. Well, Marla Gibbs, I'm always happy to see her. And, the assassination of Gianni Versace won 3 awards.
Best Limited Series and directing for Ryan Murphy, who made a big gay rights plea, and for acting for Darren Criss, who was a non-gay
Well, there's
actor.
Ryan Murphy. He did give a good speech about non-discrimination, although I found him so mannered, it was a little strange to watch.
That's why he's behind the scenes.
And
Stephen Daldry, who's out gay, even though he's married to a woman, he won direction of a drama series for The Crown. He identifies as gay.
RuPaul's Drag Race.
Got a picture of that. There he is. For Best Reality Competition. And RuPaul said, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love anyone else?
He says that every week on the show. If you watched it, you would know that.
I tried to watch I'm not a fan of the show.
I know.
I tried to watch the show.
I've watched it some years. I gave up on it lately.
The guys from Queer On presented an award for Best Actor in a Drama, and they confirmed all stereotypes of homosexuals. And then there was Hannah Gadsby.
She stole the show, as far as I was concerned. Lesbian Hannah Gadsby, Australian, who's become famous for her Netflix special, Nanette, which is really brilliant. If you have a chance to see that, please do. Starts slow, then wham, just socks you in the face. So she comes out and she says, she's very understated. Yep. She says, well, I'm here. I've gotten famous because I hate men. And that's why I'm presenting alone. And it's all very funny.
Just a joke, she kept saying.
Well, and then she says, nobody knows what jokes are, especially men. Am I right, fellas? It was just very, very cute. And it was really the most provocative moment in the show, and the most different and the most worthwhile to see.
Maybe she'll host next year.
Oh my God, Hannah Gadsby hosting an award show would just be hilarious.
She already said it was kind of surreal just being there.
Exactly, but she got a new suit out of it.
Well, Netflix and HBO tied for most awards at the thing.
I want to tell you that coming up in October in Chicago, the lesbian opera Patience and Sarah is being revived there in a new reworking of it. That'll be on weekends at the Theater Wit in Chicago. If you go to patientsarah.com, you can get all the details. And we have 45 more seconds. What do you want to say?
What do I want to say? I want you to call your senators, especially if you live in Alaska and Maine, and tell them, do not vote for Brett Kavanaugh. Stop this nomination. Slow this process down.
And I want to tell you to read Rebecca Traister's piece in this week's New York Magazine, because it is a powerful, powerful reason to get active and get involved for the long term.
And again, if you missed last week's show, go to gayusatv.org and look at recent shows for last week's show with Michael Musto, which was a winner.
And we will see you next week right here.